1 p.m. Eastern, right around the time we welcome our global television audience to the conversation. Of course, you're ahead of that, and we appreciate your being with us here on the Wednesday edition. This first hour, it's just for us here on Bloomberg Radio. And on YouTube, you can find us right now by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. And Sirius XM Channel 121 will serve you pretty well, too. Jeff Merkley is still talking. We checked. It's been about 18 and a half hours. And if you're with us on YouTube, there's a live view of the senator from Oregon, the Democratic senator, on the Senate floor, staging a marathon speech, as the Associated Press writes, to protest the president's, quote, tightening authoritarian grip on the country, unquote. He started at 6:21 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday and has been speaking this entire time, save for some Democratic colleagues who help him out. It's kind of like when Cory Booker was doing this. You can turn to questions from your colleagues without giving up the floor. Now, you can look at this a couple of ways. He's a Democratic hero standing for truth in the face of authoritarianism. Or if you ask a Republican, he's the guy who kept everybody up all night long, Capitol Police, staffers, everybody else, overtime, knowing that they are not getting paid. I'll remind you, the government's closed, and it's been 22 days. Here's a little taste of what the senator was saying late last night. Let's listen.
Mr. President, I've come to the Senate floor tonight to ring the alarm bells. We're in the most perilous moment, the biggest threat to our republic since the Civil War. President Trump is shredding our Constitution. President Trump wants us to believe that Portland, Oregon, in my home state, is full of chaos and riots, because if he can say to the American people that there are riots, he can say there's a rebellion. And if there's a rebellion, he can use that to strengthen his authoritarian grip on our nation.
Not a ball of fire in this speech. He had an easel behind him that says, ring the alarm bells, with 3 bells. Right around 2:45 a.m., Senator Merkley stopped down to untie his shoes. He said standing in one place had made his shoes a little tight. Quote, I do not recommend standing through the night and talking. By the way, he turns 69 on Friday. We'll see if he's still talking at that point, knowing that the government shutdown will be, 25 days old? This is where we start our conversation with our panel, and we've got a lot to cover with Rick and Jeannie. They're both back together, Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. She is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick is Republican strategist partner at Stone Court Capital. Rick, you spent enough years in the Senate to know how this stuff works. How are you looking at this? Is he the guy who kept a bunch of unpaid workers up all night, or a brave Democrat who's using the system the way he should?
I'd probably say a third, which is a sort of pinnacle of performative politics that is on display in virtually every corner of Washington these days. And he's just found an old style version of it, the classic filibuster. And so, yeah, I mean, he's making a point. He's not passing legislation. He's not trying to get anything done. He just wants to opine on, this difficult Trump administration and everything they're doing wrong. And I can't say I'm against these kinds of stunts. It's a stunt. And the American people are going to figure that out. The longer he goes, the more they're going to realize he's not really accomplishing anything. It's not like they're going to open up government because of this.
Well, right.
And so I do think this is a fun thing to do. It just doesn't have any impact.
I can't imagine it's very fun to stage that, but I guess that's just me. I only have to do 3 hours a day here. Jeannie, you burn calories when you're standing. Producer Matt took a look at this here. He's got the online tracker, and we're doing this in real time. Jeannie, Senator Merkley has burned 3,215 calories based on the calculator that we're using. It's a patented balance of power calculator. Is this a good look for Democrats? Actually, Cory Booker got a lot of publicity for his, but it's not like, to Rick's point, the senator's holding up a bill or reopening the government here. So what does he get for it?
Yeah, and Rick Davis has a very strange definition of fun, I'm starting to learn. The reality is that you're right. He's following in the steps of Cory Booker. We've seen this, Mr. Smith goes to Washington. We've seen Ted Cruz. These are performative, but that's all you can do when you are in the minority. And this is what the base and what Democrats are asking for. So I do think this is more important. Yeah, sure, it's a stunt. Sure, it's performative, but how could he by himself reopen the government? He simply can't. But what he can do is draw attention, just like the 7 million people out on the streets over the weekend, to what he and some of his constituents, many Americans, feel is a Washington, D.C., in which the president is overreaching and Congress has allowed him to take that power, and they are doing nothing to fight back. He's also mentioned, of course, the fact that President Trump, during a shutdown, wants the Department of Justice to give him $230 million of our taxpayer money. I mean, in addition to taking a wrecking ball to the wall of the White House and building a ballroom for the Gilded Age. So this is what the president is focused on. And Merkley has a right and a duty to stand up and do what he can, which is to go to the floor and talk for as long as he can.
Boy, so much there that I could pick up on, Jeannie, but I'm going to just remind everybody that there's an individual who will not be going to the Senate here, however long Senator Merkley speaks, and that's Paul Ingrassia. Talked about him yesterday, the president's pick here for the head of the Office of Special Counsel. I'm not going to go through this whole thing again. You probably heard about it. Even John Thune said that he's not going to pass, was the line. And it comes after a series of texts in a group chat that have been made public in which he referred to his Nazi streak and suggested that MLK Day should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell. Last evening, on Truth Social, by the way, he's definitely on brand. I will be withdrawing myself from Thursday's hearing to lead the Office of Special Counsel because, unfortunately, I do not have enough Republican votes at this time. The part of this story, Rick, that I'm curious about is your thought on the Senate here, Senate Republicans actually checking the president following some very difficult confirmations when it came to members of his cabinet. Has John Thune found the line with Trump?
I don't know if he's found a line, but I think he's testing a line. In other words, this is pretty egregious, right? I mean, anytime the word Nazi is associated with your background, you're on shaky ground in the United States Senate, whether it's Democrat or Republican, right? And that being said, he's certainly not the first one who has had a controversial nomination, and Thune's done an amazing job of wrangling up these Republican senators and perp walking them down to the Senate to vote for these guys. And so, like, what's the difference here? And I do think two things. One, I do think that the grip that Trump has is wearing out a little bit in the United States Senate. It normally would for any president after going into their second year who is a lame duck, right? And so it's not like this is his first term and you don't know how long he's going to be around. He's going to check the box, in a few weeks on his, victory, and in January his first year in office. And everything from that point on, and it even is indicative today, he starts to lose a little bit of power every day. And so this may be the first indication we have that some of that power loss is starting to affect him. I mean, obviously he's fighting to assume as much power as he can as president, but his influence definitely wanes over time.
Really interesting, Jeannie, to consider that the president had Senate Republicans at the Rose Garden Club for lunch yesterday. By the way, we did find out what was on the menu. It was cheeseburgers and fries as the president sipped a Diet Coke out there in the sun. That was not just to thank senators for holding the line on the shutdown. That was to thank senators. There you see the president on YouTube out there in the Rose Garden. That was to thank the senators for helping to approve his nominees, in many cases en bloc, which is what the Senate's been forced to do. It was on that same day, only hours later, Paul Ingrassia had to announce, CC corrects me, he was on Twitter as well, that he doesn't have the Republican votes. What does that tell you about the president's relationship with Republicans in the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does say that John Thune recognizes that he wants to be majority leader and he wants the Republicans to control Congress. And it's hard to do that when you are flying through nominees who say the sort of despicable and deplorable things that this nominee said. But I think the bigger question is, why is he still apparently serving at the White House as a liaison to the Department of Homeland Security? Why is somebody who has the past that he has, because this did not just erupt now. This is somebody who has met with Nick Fuentes. He has written and said things that people have pointed to that are in the area of white supremacy. So this was not a huge shock. There's a pattern here. And yet he was put up in the first place. Why was he nominated in the first place? And you can't even argue that he is incredibly qualified. And so we need to overlook this horrendous things he said because he's so qualified. Even James Lankford said he's grossly unqualified, which again raises the question, what is the White House doing with a nominee like this? This is the same White House that went very strongly and rightly so to college campuses against students and said, you cannot continue to go to college if you are guilty of saying anything anti-Semitic. Rightly so. We will take you down. And yet they don't seem to have the same concern when that same rhetoric is coming from the right. And that is very concerning.
Well, I'll tell you, Jeannie mentioned the demolition of the East Wing and the construction of the ballroom. Rick, we talked about this briefly yesterday. You could actually hear sounds of construction work being done as the president was speaking. Over the past 24 hours, we've learned a lot more about this. It's not even in terms of who's paying for it or whatever, but the extent to which, look at these images on YouTube. They're spraying water on this thing to keep the dust down in the neighborhood, literally ripping the East Wing apart with a backhoe. The Washington Post reporting that the demolition job has been expanded to include the destruction of much of the East Wing. This is the East Wing that was not going to be touched as part of this project to make room again for a 90,000 square foot ballroom. Rick, they're telling federal workers not to take pictures of this to get it out there because, I mean, forget this being an eyesore. This is breaking a lot of hearts, and the White House apparently did not ask for permission to go through the proper channels to do this. We've only got a minute left. Rick, are we pearl clutching here, or is this a bit of a disgrace to see at the White House?
You know, look, I mean, everything changes in politics and in Washington over time. This is a pretty significant and if not troubling occurrence. He's promised not to do exactly what he's doing. This is what he did at Mar-a-Lago when he acquired, you know, a historic estate, immediately started turning it into something that he could use in a more commercial way. We never really went through any